Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our May meeting of the Fish and Wildlife Board. My name is Brad Ferland, and I'll be chairing the meeting. First thing we will do, first thing I would like to do is just mention that we might be having a little difficulty with our technology. The camera seems to be moving around the room on its own tonight, so the camera may not be focused on whoever's speaking. So just bear with us. But it's my understanding that at least the voice is going through fine and is recording fine, but the camera may be a little out of whack. So just heads up. Okay, first item we'll do is just we'll do introductions, and we'll go with the board first, and then we'll go to the department second. We'll start over there with Neil.
Neil Hogan, Bennington County. Richard Craig, Lamoille County.
Ryan Kilborn, Orange County.
Jeff Corey, Franklin County.
Bob Patterson, Addison County.
Brad Ferland, Caledonia County.
Martin Van Buren, Rutland County.
Allison Frazier, Chittenden County.
Paul Noel, Orleans County.
Beth Iveling, Grand Isle County.
And online,
Nick Burnham, Windsor County.
Greg Walsh, Essex Junction.
just board members, please. David Dean, are you with us?
Maybe I was hoping to be one day.
Okay, and David Dean is with us. David, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
We can now. Yep. Okay, so David Dean. Not with us tonight is Linda Hook from Essex County and John Val San Giacomo from Washington County. So, Commissioner.
Great. Hi, my name is Andrea Shortsleeve. I'm the interim commissioner of the Department of Fish and Wildlife, and I will swing it over to introduce our staff. Nick Fortin.
Fortin, your Moose project leader.
David Salsville, program manager.
Justin Stedman, director of the Warden Service, and he's out manning the door, but I just wanted, or at the door, but I just wanted to let everybody know, the woman in uniform is the new major of the Warden Service, Jenna Reed, so she'll be taking over for Sean Fowler, who is retiring in July. So sorry she's not here to introduce herself, but that's who's walking around. So
Good evening, everybody. John Ostrom, the director of the Wildlife Division.
Catherine Guessing, general counsel for the agency. Used to be just here temporarily because Hannah's on vacation.
Nice to see you, Catherine.
Abigail Connolly, principal assistant for commissioner.
Great. And then we'll come over here to Jens.
I'm Jens Hilka, conservation planner department. I'm Bob Zato, I'm an ecologist with the department.
Great. And then we have Major came in. And then I think we have a couple staff members online. Like to introduce yourselves, please.
John
ahead,
Hall, John Hall, Outreach Division.
Hey, everybody. Eric Palmer, Fish Division Director.
Hey, Megan Dooney with the Outreach Division also.
I think that's it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner. Welcome, everybody. First item tonight, next item will, any comments on the agenda as presented? If not, all those in favor of accepting the agenda as presented, signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, ayes have it. Approval of the previous meeting minutes of April 30th. Do I have a motion to accept those as presented?
I make the motion to accept the minutes with one slight change.
Okay.
And that was, I spoke to Abigail earlier. Dennis Fournier, it was listed that he spoke about the fishing, and he actually spoke about muzzle loading.
Gotcha. Thank you.
second that.
Okay. So I have a motion and a second to accept the meetings as accept with the amendment with the amendment to the comments, the minutes. So all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, ayes have it. Before we go on to public comments, I'd like to turn it over to Andrea. She has a couple comments to make.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to say that I'm grateful to all the members of the public who come in and engage in these meetings and provide public comment. It's a really important part of our process and part of our meeting. So thank you for coming in. And in that sense, I'd also just like to remind everyone that when you come up to express your perspectives, your opinions, you need to be respectful of others, especially, or even if you don't agree with their perspectives. So just keep that in mind as when we do public comments. Thank you.
Thank you. And actually, before we ask someone to come up as well too, I have a public comments point to bring up. I think all of us may have received it from Hannah Smith, an email that was a public comment that was sent to us by someone who had comments on the fishing rules that we addressed last meeting. And they were there. I think they were, I don't know that they were aware that we had actually had our second vote, and that is now moving on to the to LCAR. But they recommended that we not vote, not change any of the catch limits, and recommended that the department implement a lot of efforts around data collection, which, like we heard last week, they created the panfish team, and they're actually doing that moving forward anyway. So I think we should respond back to them. And I didn't catch that it was sent to the board. I thought it went to the department. That's why I personally didn't respond. So I'm just going to let them know that we have no intentions of changing that rule at this point, that it's going on to LCAR, and just give them an update on where we're at. And if anybody has any concerns with that or doesn't agree with that, just let me know. I'll just respond on our behalf. Okay. Thank you.
Copy us on that or just.
Yeah, I can. Absolutely can. Yep, absolutely. Yep. Okay. With that said, I don't have a list, so I don't. Thank you. All right, we do have a few people here that want to spend a couple minutes with us, sharing their thoughts. So as I call your name, just stand up and identify yourself. And please be conscious of the 2 minutes so that everyone gets their fair share. First individual is Justin Lindholm from Mendon.
Okay, I'm Dr. Lindholm from Mendon. I'm a former member of the Fish and Wildlife Board. Last year, I testified in the State House to try to keep you people from losing your power. And they were worried about you folks rubber stamping everything that the department wants and other people want, and increasing deer kill or animal kill and all this business. I attended 3 of the last 5 deer regulation change meetings. I talked to many who attended these meetings and many others who were outside the meetings. Most were happy with the changes, the 6 of the 7 changes, but not the one where you hunt does during the rifle season. And there are several reasons for this. One of them is it's going to be a safety issue. In the safety issue, that the other one is going to be too many antlerless deer are going to be taken out at once. And there are several ways this can happen. With rifles, there's a lot more deer moving around all the time. And it's just going to be, they're going to take out so many that there are not going to be enough left, except for landowner permits after the first year. People are going to be really not happy that the landowners are going to be the ones basically getting the permits. The department said that based on current regulations, everybody's happy, or 50% are happy with hunting during rifle. But how about the proposed changes? That's what they should ask. For safety, there's too much going on rapidly. People have rapid firing weapons. This has gone on for decades. Of people that are given a single shot take more time to shoot, no matter what it is, single shot, regular rifle. They will not, there are going to be some accidents, and they're worried about safety. Most of the people I've talked to, we just finished a hunter safety course. This does not make people safe. We tell them that. In fact, we have more women and girls in this course we just taught than boys and men. First time ever. We want those people to feel safe during the rifle season. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, next on the list we have Rob Coronado.
Is it all right if I come to the front of the room?
Sure. Yep.
So, board members, good to see you again. I hope the ticks aren't too bad in your area. I was I'm delighted to see that you guys had received a presentation on Vermont conservation design. Because as you've heard before, I've talked about wildlife crossings, not just here in Vermont, but all over. This legislative session, there's a lot of discussion about cougars coming back to Vermont. And it was good to see there's a lot of interest in that and support. I know the department is looking into some research and conferences that are happening. But most importantly for me is that's the kind of effort that really requires something like conservation design and wildlife crossings to work. If you have a chance, this book by Ben Goldfarb, the author of Eager, wrote about beavers, crossings, how road ecology is shaping the future of our planet. I fancy myself a wildlife advocate. And in this book, I read what confirmed what was my feelings, and that is at some point in the last 25 years, more animals are being killed by cars than they are by hunters, trappers, or any consumptive user group. And those are animals that are being wasted. You just have to drive to Burlington on I-89 to see that confirmed. All the blood splatters, the carcasses. I've been on V-Trans tours with prospective plans for some of the big wildlife crossings that will reconnect the Green Mountains. And I just want to say that that's something that all wildlife advocates, all stakeholders, hunters, trappers should be working for. It's going to take a lot of money. It's going to be taking a lot of support. And really, I hope that that's something that we all can work together on in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Next, I have Harry Douillet.
I live in area B, and I grew up in A, Champlain Islands there. And so I've lived there 30 years, and I'm 76 next month, so I've been around a while. And my concern is, and it's always been, that to get huntable numbers of what I call mature bucks on the ground, let's say by October 1st every year. And I know we did the antler restriction thing, and in my opinion, I haven't even looked at the numbers. I don't think that gained us much of anything. So to me, it's time to move beyond that. We got to do something to get us, well, me, where I think we should be. And I really think what that's come down to. I don't think restrictions will fully do it, but I like the idea of the $1, and I like the idea of going to 3 points on one side, and then a big flip around. I think we need to reduce the amount of hunters hunting bucks. That's the only way to get there. Antler restrictions aren't going to do it. I propose going to a lottery on bucks. People are going to jump up and down, but people who understand that, you're going to eventually get there anyway. So let's say let's say last year the kill was 10,000. I don't know what it was. I haven't looked through all the numbers, but you guys got all the numbers. So if you work your numbers backwards to, let's say, if by October 1st, if the target was to get 20% of the bucks on the ground should be 4 years old or older. How do we get there? You guys got all the math. You work your math backwards. Maybe the kill should be really 6,000. And so you got to use the math backwards.
Susan, that's
how many. That's it.
That's 2 minutes. Flies.
You guys.
Sorry about that. Thank you. Appreciate it. And next is Bert, but Bert, I don't believe you want to have any comments. Okay. So I think that's anybody else. Did I miss anybody online wish to share some comments? 2 minutes worth of comments.
Yep. Yeah, this is Greg Walsh from Essex. I'm 82. I kill more than my fair share of deer. So that's not as much an interest for me as it is for my 10-year-old grandson, who I'm anxious to get into the woods this year. So I totally support the youth program you have. If we don't have some sort of form of conservation like that, we'll never pay for what's ahead of us. And 2 comments that surprised me. A great number of my friends that hunt are moving into hunting in New York. They're doing that because of the posted property. Now, I hunt Area B, and it's hideous how much posting there is, and yet it's an incredibly productive deer location. But of course, they're not idiots. They're on property where they're protected. I think you've got to start seriously thinking of doing what some of the other states have done. And that is, I hate to do it, but you're going to have to do something for conservation so that those people that are posted, money's the thing that talks. They get them to subscribe to a program and record the easement or the document that supports this, and get them some cash so that they unlock the gates. I don't know if it'll work. There's some hard-nosed people, but that's one of the things I think that we're going to have to do. I've talked to a lot of wardens. They all say the same thing. I'm preaching to the choir. So I support you guys. You're a very talented group of people. We're very lucky in Vermont, and I wish you guys the best of luck.
Thank you. Anybody else online? Brenna?
Hi, yes. This is Brenna Galdenzi from Protect Our Wildlife out of Stowe. Some of you in this room were copied on emails that were sent to Commissioner Shortsleeve and Brad Ferlin and others in this room tonight about a sportsman who we suspect, with very good reason, wrote my name down on the public comment sheet on the April 30th meeting. And when my name was called out to speak, he claimed that I had left the room. I was never there, not even virtually. He then used his 2 minutes of public comment to disparage me and my organization completely off topic. I have to tell you, when I was made aware of this, it had a real chilling effect on me, because that's taken this level of vitriol and contention to a whole nother level when I have someone who was acting fraudulently against me and my organization. Wildlife advocates have acted professionally and respectfully during these meetings. Commissioner Shortsleeve's message to you tonight was not what we had in mind at all. Again, what happened at the April 30th meeting should be called out for what it was: fraudulent. Legislative chairs have the ability at the State House to manage their committee discussions and tell witnesses to stick to the topic at hand and not focus on people or organizations. I know for sure that's true, because I have been asked by legislative chairs to stick to the topics and not people or organizations. The board chair and Commissioner Shortsleeve, you should do the same. It's up to you to manage these board meetings in an open, inclusive way to encourage participation. Allowing sportsmen to use their 2 minutes to defame fellow Vermonters is encouraging more divisiveness and polarization, the very things that you purportedly speak out against. I ask you to do better. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else online? Barbara Filetti?
Yeah, thank you very much for allowing me to speak as well. I am also a member of Protect Our Wildlife's board. And I think for me, one of the other issues about the comments that were made were addressing the issue that POW is not science-based and defaming the organization that way. I think for any of you who read the very well-researched petition about fishers and AR submitted by POW's board member, Jennifer Lovett, know that we do work in a very science-based way. We do stick to the issues, and we do hope you will encourage all people who are making public comment to act in a similar way, so that there is a respectful discussion and disagreement. I mean, we do disagree, and I recognize that. And I appreciate your comments, Commissioner Shortsleeve, about keeping the tone respectful. So thank you for that. And thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you. Anybody else would like to make public?
Nathan Cleveland.
Nathan Cleveland?
Yes, thank you for all the work that you guys do, first of all. But second of all, as a father whose son was able to be successful last year during youth weekend, very concerned about the ability to take doe during rifle season and the inherent safety risks that come around with that. I know plenty of old farmers from and old residents that have been here for generations that have a saying of if it's brown, take it down. And I'm worried about that and the safety issues that come along with being able to shoot a doe during rifle season. So I'm opposed to that. I'm also interested in keeping the youth weekend, not the weekend prior to rifle season. I think it's a really good opportunity for youth to get out in the woods prior to rifle season and also have a break between youth season and rifle season. So those are my two concerns, and I appreciate all the work that you guys do in the consideration of taking in these public comments as you make your decisions. So thank you guys for the work that you do.
Thank you.
I don't see anyone else with their hands raised, but if you don't know how to raise your hand, please unmute yourself and make a public comment if you would like to.
Anybody else online? Last chance. Okay, seeing none, that will be it for public comments. Thank you, everybody, for your comments. Next on the agenda is the 2025 antlerless deer permits and youth season, our final vote. I will turn that over to the department.
Great. Nick?
But I don't have a presentation. I just put this up there so you know what you're voting. So you all have hopefully had a chance to read through the public comments on the antlerless recommendation this year. They were a little light. They're essentially all from the public hearings. Did not receive any email comments on this specifically. Of course, we have the rule changes going on, and that kind of stole the attention, right? We actually did receive one email earlier this week after the comment deadline for this, and it was just said, I support this, in addition to a bunch of comments about the rule changes. But from all the public meeting comments, there's nothing that really stood out to me. Most folks were at least okay with it, if not supportive. Obviously, every year we have a fair number of folks who are just generally concerned about the number of deer they're seeing, and the potential impact, of course, of antlerless harvest on the number of deer they're seeing. That's the nature of deer management in Vermont. We don't have a ton of deer, but we still need to manage them. So we're always wanting to see more deer, right? But again, that's all I really have. There's nothing that really stood out to me. So if anyone has any questions about any of it, I'm happy to answer.
I'll ask you a question. We obviously have too many deer on the landscape, is what we hear between this presentation and the rule changes that we're going through and some of the recommended changes to the rule changes. Can you explain to us why we don't increase our permit limits during this process that would help us address that issue?
So why we don't issue more permits?
More permits.
So the issue we have is that the places where we have too many deer, the management units, WMUs, where we have too many deer, are ones where we can't issue more antlerless permits, generally speaking. There are a lot of units on here where we can manage deer just fine, and we're pretty close to our goals in those units, and so the number of permits here is trying to keep deer numbers roughly where they're at. The places where we really need to reduce deer numbers, primarily we're talking Champlain Valley,
Western Vermont, we can't issue more permits. We won't sell all the permits that we're allocating this year. So that's why we're proposing rule changes. But yeah, that's why we could take the approach of allocating the number of permits we think it would take to drive that down. And this would maybe look something like 30,000 permits, but we know we're not going to sell them. And so we have taken the approach of not allocating too much more than we think we can sell, essentially.
How many permits got sold last year? Roughly.
23,800 or 900, so slightly more than this. But again, it's it's by WMU. There will still be WMUs this year that don't sell all the permits because not every hunter wants to travel to that WMU hunt training. So likely, my guess would be we'll end up 21,000 something, maybe 22,000 total permits sold this year. Where we're at. No one has further questions. I'll leave that up. Any questions for Nick?
I'd like to make a motion to vote on the antlerless deer harvest as recommended.
I second that.
Okay, any further comments? Questions, concerns? Hearing none, all those in favor of the proposal around antlerless deer and youth novice season, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. The proposal is accepted as presented. Thank you, Nick. Okay, next item on the agenda is the presentation on Vermont conservation design.
Great. And well, Jens and Bob start setting up. I just want to give a brief introduction to this. What we're going to be learning about is a science-based assessment of ecologically functional and connected landscape of Vermont. This represents a lot of work that our department has done in partnership with several other organizations, including our sister department of Forest Parks and Recreation, National Wild Turkey Federation, Nature Conservancy, a whole gamut of our partnering organizations. And so you may be wondering why we're going to be presenting this to you as the board. My perspective is that we give you all a lot of background on the science and how we make decisions and recommendations on seasons and limits and how we understand the health of populations. So this is an opportunity to learn more background on some scientific information at a large landscape scale that we use to inform how we understand how things like moose and bear move across the landscape, how we pick and choose and focus on areas for land acquisition for wildlife management areas and other conservation parcels, all the way down to where we need to protect for ended and endangered species. So this is a lot of really great scientific information. It really informs a lot of the work that we do, and in turn informs a lot of the work and decisions that this board makes. So these two are awesome ecologists, professionals. They are great presenters, and I hope you learn a lot from them. And so with that, I will introduce John Austin, or turn it over to John.
Thank you, Commissioner. I just wanted to take the opportunity to introduce my colleagues tonight. These are two folks from the Wildlife Division who don't typically have an opportunity to speak with this board. We have Bob Zano, who is our natural community ecologist, does everything natural community related, has been with the department for, gosh, I don't know how many years, 2008. Since 2008. And Jens Silka, our conservation planning biologist. Jens works with Vermont communities throughout the state to help them understand how to best incorporate wildlife conservation considerations into local and regional plans, amongst many other things. Both of these individuals have been instrumental from the very beginning in developing what we call Vermont conservation design, what the commissioner just described to you. And this is something that we're really quite proud of. It's an example of landscape scale analyses that is well, I'm biased, of course, but I would say unmatched within the region. There's other states that have something similar, but I think ours is pretty darn good. In addition to working with, well, our design is based in part on some other science that has been developed by the Nature Conservancy and academic institutions. There is, for instance, the Nature Conservancy's Resilient Connected Network of Lands that shows the connected landscape throughout the Atlantic seaboard. It's a very impressive piece of scientific work. All of this information is used to guide lots of different decisions, and not just in the state of Vermont, but throughout the region. One of the things that you might not be aware of, but the department and our agency work with partners from around the region, both within the United States and in Canada, to look at wildlife conservation issues broadly. So we're thinking about wood turtles in Rhode Island, the woodland caribou in northern Quebec, and everything in between. And this is the sort of information that we use to help inform conservation decisions. So I'm sure you're going to find this informative and interesting, and I'll turn it over to these gentlemen to give you the presentation, and then we can have a Q&A at the end.
Great. Thank you so much. It's a real pleasure to be here with you all tonight. Again, my name is Jens. I'm going to get things started, and then I'll turn it over to Bob. Just before we get too far along, I just want to make sure we're all on the same page in terms of what we're talking about. So Vermont Conservation Design is a science-based vision to sustain the state's valued natural areas, forests, waters, wildlife, and plants for future generations. So it's the conservation design is the big picture vision. It's a prioritization. It answers how much is enough, and where do we need these different elements of the landscape. Bob will get into a great amount of detail about the components that are adding up to this prioritization. So we'll really have an opportunity to get under the hood of what this prioritization is. But it's a design. It's a big picture vision. And so you can think of Vermont Conservation Design as the science that's really guiding that vision. BioFinder is a website, and that's an online mapping tool, and that's where we host the Vermont Conservation Design. And that website is open to everyone, and you can interact with the design. And so you start out with this statewide vision of what the prioritization is, and then invariably you're going to zoom into your parcel, and you're going to do that cosmic zoom. And I'll explain that a little bit more. And so you'll have an opportunity to really understand what that big picture vision is and how that translates into a particular place on the ground. Now, the conservation design can be thought of as a singular map. It's a singular prioritization, that one that you see at the far right. And in the interest of transparency, it's broken out into a variety of different components. And so you can drill down from that one map, you can drill down into a series of component maps to figure out why a particular place was called highest priority or not prioritized. So it's both a singular map and a suite of components that add up to that whole. It's our conservation framework. And so we'll talk a little bit about that at the end, about the way that the conservation design is guiding various parts of the department's efforts, from land acquisition to help with land use planning and everything in between. Now, we really started this as a science project, and we're really trying to understand the prioritization. But more than that, the design really helps maintain nature and the benefits that provides. So as we think about why we're doing this design, well, it helps maintain an intact, connected network of forests and waters. And that's how the animals that we love are able to move around. And so this is the big picture vision that really offers the enabling conditions for the many species that we love. This design conserves species and natural communities. So it goes from that landscape scale down to the natural community and even individual species scale. And it allows nature to adapt to a changing climate. So it's not just a single snapshot of where there's currently biological diversity. It really does look ahead into the future. Where are we going to have biological diversity in the future? And how do we maintain that even as the plants and animals are changing on the landscape? The conservation design really helps us to offer environmental services, things like clean air, water, carbon sequestration, flood protection. All of these services that the natural world provides comes along as part of the package when we look at this network, this prioritized network of the most important lands and waters in Vermont. And so when I talk to the public, when I talk to communities across Vermont, I really jump up and down about how important these services are in terms of what they give back to people, both in terms of our well-being and also economically, and of course, ecologically. The design is a natural climate solution. And so as we think not just about the mitigation side of climate change, reducing the amount of carbon that's out there, we also want to think about the adaptation side. And so how do we allow for plants and animals to shift around on the landscape? The Nature Conservancy is estimating that entire populations are moving north and south away from the equator on average 11 miles per decade, about a mile per year. Entire populations adjusting their range away from the equator a mile per year. And so understanding how animals are shifting their ranges and where that takes place on the landscape is really incredibly important. Now, of course, more than any of that, the design helps support social and economic values like working farms and forests. And so there's so many different layers to the design, but it makes room for that working landscape. That's really at the heart of what makes Vermont, and really at the heart of our economy. So the design speaks to these ecologically important places, but captures so much more than that. And of course, the natural rural character and natural beauty. So in 2021, the department received a state wildlife grant to update the conservation design. We first began work on the design in, I think, 2011. And so this is now the fourth time we've updated the design. And by 2023, we completed that update. And so it's just tremendously exciting to have had this long to keep going and be able to refine it again, and really get our science to where we want it to be. Now, at the heart of the update is this concept of the forest block. It's really a unit in conservation planning. I'm not talking about a boundary on a map. I'm talking about conceptually a unit that we use to help prioritize the landscape. So the forest block, I'm not talking about land ownership. I'm talking about natural cover. So natural cover surrounded by roads, development, agriculture. And so this idea of the forest block, well, we have something like, I don't know what, 4,062 of them. The average size is about 1,000 acres. The smallest is 20 acres. We cut it off at 20 acres. And the largest is about 150,000 acres. And so you can see they're colored by size. You can see that the largest forest blocks in Vermont are generally along the spine of the Greens in the northeastern highlands and a few here in Piedmont. We, of course, have smaller forest blocks in the Champlain Valley and the Connecticut River Valley, but we also have exponentially more biological diversity in the valleys than we do along the spine of the Greens. So this concept of the forest block is really critical to the conservation planning and to the update. Now, we first made the habitat blocks, the forest blocks data set in 2011. And with this newest update, we have a resolution that is 3,600 times better than the previous version. Our ability to detect the edges of the forest blocks is really unparalleled. We're using LiDAR-derived land cover data that allows us to seriously identify a particular tree in a field. That's the kind of quality data we're dealing with, 0.5 meter data. So our understanding of the edges of the blocks has really dramatically increased. And I'll show you that here. This is an aerial photo from Waitsfield. That's the old version at left. And then there at right is the newer version. And so you can really see how pixelated the older version is, how blocky it is. And with the newer version, you can see that it's much crisper. We intentionally removed a buffer around every house, and that allows us to, allows the user to better understand what forests are being degraded by development. So it takes on this Swiss cheese appearance when you have a lot of housing in there. And that's just a really quick way of saying, oh, okay, so yes, that's still a forest. There's still a lot of trees there, but there are other things going on, barking dogs, driveways, etc. I'll just come back to our better resolution. So we have a better ability to detect the edges of the forest blocks. The other piece here is that allows us to understand where the forests are getting closer to the road. In turn, that allows us to better understand where there are wildlife road crossings. And so the quality of our wildlife road crossing data, as Bob will explain, is really much, much better than it ever has been. And so the implications of beginning with these high resolution habitat blocks spills over into other products that we'll talk about in a second. So we're really thrilled with the new habitat blocks data set and the way that it's been able to transform our understanding of the landscape. We didn't find any forests that we didn't already know about, since 2011, but our ability to detect the edges has really improved. What that also means is that we cannot compare the 2011 data set and the current one to understand a change in forest cover over time, because it is apples and oranges. The high quality of the current data and the comparative low quality of the previous data sets just means we're not going to see a real difference between the two. If anything, it will show an increase in forest cover over those 10 years. And that's not real. That's really just about our ability to detect and not what's really happening on the ground. But moving forward, the Vermont is going to continue to do LiDAR flights along Vermont. And so that will allow us to use this same methodology as we move in the future. And so we'll be able to redo that, and then we'll be able to track forest fragmentation in high quality, high resolution over time. Now, I just show you another example of how the forest blocks have really translated into better quality road crossing data. And so here's another example where you can really see just how the impact of that higher quality data. So the design identifies these most important lands and waters. And so we begin with a selection of the habitat blocks. Right? So there are 4,000, whatever they are, 62 of them statewide. And that's all of them. That's the raw data. Now we take a subset of those and we prioritize them. And we say, these are the most important for a variety of different reasons. And so we begin with our high priority landscape blocks, a selection of forest blocks. So I'm building now. We started with the raw data of the habitat blocks. Now we're taking a selection of them and we're going to build our conservation design with those. Then we're going to add in all of our highest priority surface waters and riparian areas. And that is essentially everything that is wet. Streams, rivers, lakes, ponds, all at that really prioritized, or really at that highest priority rank. So that's the next piece of the design. Then we add in these highest priority natural communities and habitat features. And again, Bob will go into the details of each of those components, but I just want to sketch out the general, how we built this design and the general parts of it. And so when you add all those together, you get that final map, the ecologically functional landscape, the Vermont conservation design. And so when I speak about the conservation design as a singular map, this is the one I'm talking about, built up of all of these components. So this concept of ecological function is really important for us to understand. It's the degree to which an ecosystem can function under natural processes, allowing all its plants and animals to thrive, reproduce, migrate, and move in response to environmental change. So we're looking for ecological function on the landscape. And there are different ecological functions in different places. So that as you look at that dark green highest priority area, different places have different ecological functions. And you have to drill down into the map to understand, well, what's the function of that particular place? Is it a floodplain? Is it an interior forest block? What role is it doing in the natural world? And that will allow you to understand why it was prioritized the way it was. Incidentally, it's also that concept of ecological function is really important for us to consider in terms of what human uses might be appropriate there. A lot of people, when they see me coming in my green uniform and they see me showing a map with a bunch of dark green on it, they assume that I mean no development, no human use. We got to keep people out of there. And that's not necessarily the case because there are different ecological functions in different places. So you have to drill down into the map to understand what the function is, to be able to understand what human uses are potentially appropriate there or not. So if you think about a big forest block, well, there's a lot of space around the edge of that forest block where development could absolutely happen and not impact the ability of that block to be large interior forest. But there are parts of that perimeter that connect to other blocks. And if you put a house in the middle of that connection, you are absolutely affecting that function of connectivity between the blocks. So you have to understand what the function is of a particular place to understand what human uses are possible there. Are you folks with me? Are we doing all right? Thank you. Great. So, as we think about this design, really it's three words that help us understand what we're looking for here: intact, connected, and diverse. We need our natural world to be intact. We need our forest blocks to be intact. We need our waterways to be intact. We need them to be connected to one another. And we need diversity on the landscape. We need all the different pieces in order to add up to this larger design. So the design also operates at different scales. So when I showed you that dark green map, dark green and light green, that's really, we're thinking at the landscape scale. Imagine you're flying 8,000 feet over the surface of Vermont, and those are the sorts of patterns that you can see, where there's forest, where there are waterways, where there are fields, where there's development. So understanding the world at that landscape scale. But we built into the design the natural community scale. And we'll talk a lot more about the natural communities and those hotspots of biological diversity, and thinking about components like young and old forests, wetlands, grasslands, underground habitats at that natural community scale. And then, of course, there's also the species scale. There are some species that fall through the cracks. You cannot predict where there's good bumblebee habitat in Vermont by looking at forest cover. There are some species that we're going to have to go one by one. But we get a lot more efficiency by concentrating at the landscape scale. We're going to pick up more species first at this landscape scale and only operate species by species in terms of recovery plans, for example, where we have to. The more work we can do here, the more efficient it is. If we go one by one, we'll get less efficient. I talked a little bit, just in closing for my section, I talked a little bit about the Zoom and the ability to use BioFinder to help understand the design at different scales. So here's a section of the Upper Valley. And when you start at this landscape scale, you can just understand the big picture pattern of, well, okay, where's their highest priority and priority. And then you can begin to zoom in and say, all right, well, in one particular town like Stratford, what's the larger pattern here in terms of where there's larger forests, where there's priority forest? And then you can zoom down and start understanding individual components at the community and species scale. And you can even go farther and go to an individual parcel and say, well, what's on my land? What are the particular components that are present here? And so I often affectionately call that the cosmic zoom in terms of being able to understand your place at a different scale. You get more meaning thinking about your parcel or your town when you understand it in that larger ecological context. Great. And with that, let me just turn it over to you. Okay. Yes.
So I want to walk you through the parts. You heard a lot about what this is and how it all comes together. And I want to step down into all the pieces, put them together, stack them up. And this really came out of thinking about the broad mission of the department, the conservation of fish, wildlife, plants, and their habitats for the people of Vermont. What does that actually entail, all of those species? And it turns out that it's something estimated to be like 24 to 40,000 different species. And I won't be able to use the pointer, I guess. Vertebrate animals are just this tiny little slice of the pie. Vascular plants, trees, flowers are that green slice. And there's all these other species that are out there contributing to our ecosystems, presumably having some role and function in having this whole thing pulled together, supporting the common species that we see all the time. We want to keep all those parts. We want to keep these ecosystems functional so that we keep everything that we value here on the landscape, both for its own value and for all the values that we get from it. So how do we efficiently? We're certainly not going to go species by species through tens of thousands. So the idea was to come up with a set of features that efficiently meet the needs to conserve the majority of those. And we don't know what they all are. We don't have names for all these species. We certainly don't know what they all mean exactly, but we think if we can use broader features, for example, if we conserve alder swamps, we conserve a bunch of common species, we probably conserve some pollinators associated with alder, the other flowering plants that are in those places. We might conserve wood trees if they happen to be in that place. We don't have to go find each one of those things. So we can get some conservation efficiency by finding these larger features. Same thing in the Northeast Kingdom, if we conserve black spruce swamps, all sorts of common species conserved. Maybe there's spruce grouse still using some of those places. And maybe we'll conserve examples of this rare moss, splachnum moss, that only grows on moose and deer dung in the forest. So what I'm about to show you here, these parts, are our attempt to efficiently get at that set of features that would conserve many, many species, starting at the broadest scale, using this concept of forest blocks, which are forests, but also all the other little patches that you have in there, like a beaver wetland, a fen, maybe an oak woodland outcrop at the top of a low hill. All of that stuff is part of these forest blocks. So there's a great diversity in those blocks collectively. So we've prioritized the forest blocks in 3 ways. I'm going to go into them in a minute. And then we've also got the waters, the lakes and ponds, rivers and streams, and riparian areas. The first way we prioritized forest blocks, I think, is the most intuitive. It's just, what are the biggest ones in all the different regions of the state? We can divide the state up into 9 biophysical regions that are, the lines kind of roughly track some of the groupings of WMUs. So when we're looking at what's the best examples of forest blocks in the Champlain Valley, like Jens said, they're going to be smaller than the ones in Kingdom or in the Southern Green Mountains, and we wanted to reflect those regional differences. So we have a set of blocks shown here with dark blue is highest priority, light blue is priority, that are the biggest blocks in all those regions and provide that best interior forest function, supporting many, many species. Actually, just go back real quick here. You'll notice, though, that those blocks don't necessarily form a connected network. And we want to make sure that species, wildlife, individual animals can move between those blocks, and also that species can do these long-term shifts in their distributions, in their ranges over time. So we want to make sure that we have a connection. We have connections across the landscape. And we can look for those connections where there's forest and other natural cover in proximity. We did that, and we built a whole network of blocks, somewhat based on those interior forest blocks, but also thinking about little blocks that by themselves might not have great value, but because of their location, they're the stepping stones that help animals, plants and animals really get from one place to another over time. And so this network here of highest priority connectivity blocks, dark orange, you can trace lines all across the state. And this is important for us here in Vermont. It also supports regional conservation because this connects the Adirondacks through West Haven all the way across to the Northeast Kingdom, up into New Hampshire, Maine, the Gaspé Peninsula, and Quebec. And it connects the Berkshires up to the Sutton Mountains in Quebec. So we're at this crossroads of ecological connectivity. Again, both for individual animals moving about the landscape and for these long-term power species going to find their place in a changing climate. I recognize that these might be kind of detailed, and if you've got questions, rather than trying to remember that question for the whole presentation, happy to answer some while we're going. Maybe if they're big questions, we can save them for the end. The third way we've prioritized forest blocks is thinking again about the diversity of Vermont's landscape. Vermont has a variety of bedrock types, soil types, landforms, steep mountains, but also low hills, flats, clay plain flats, and sand plain flats in the valleys. All of those things support different biological diversity. If you're just going for the biggest forest blocks or connected forest blocks, you might not get that full suite of places that support different plants and animals. And so we looked at prioritizing forest blocks based on representing all of Vermont's geological settings, which sounds kind of wonky, but if you think about certain plants need different growing conditions. Blueberries need acidic soils. Other plants need very rich limey soils. Wanting to make sure we have that mix in it. Those species then support pollinators. They cascade up through the whole ecological system. And we want to think about representing all of those different settings. Many of our rare species are found in some of these rare settings like sand flats, clay plain flats, or low calcium-rich hills, limey hills that we have in the valleys. Yeah.
Can I just ask a question? Because I live in the island, so is this the border of Vermont and not the actual boundary of the land?
Oh, that is a great question. Yeah, this is for those of us who think in forest blocks, we just think about the forest and everything else just kind of disappears. That is the line right up through the middle of Lake Champlain. And so let's see if I can get this right. That is Missisquoi. So this would be like Alburg, Grand Isle down into North Hero, South Hero. We're seeing it without a great reference to the overall land shape here.
So the other side is the middle of the Connecticut? Or
what would that be? That'd be the mean high water mark on our side. I think.
Okay.
But yeah, it's the Connecticut River.
Yeah.
Mean low water mark.
Stand corrected. Thank you.
Mean low water mark on the Vermont side.
That's well, I got one more slide about geology, but just some examples of plants and animals that are tied to different settings. Just tell you one story. This is the West Virginia white butterfly. It's a rare butterfly in Vermont and in the Northeast. It has a specific host plant, toothwort, that only grows in places where you have limey soils. And so if you want to find the West Virginia white bear butterfly, you need to find those limey soils, you need to find that toothwort plant, and then you'll find, maybe if you're lucky, the West Virginia white. Just one example of how many species are tied to these geological settings. Waters and riparian areas, these are all connected. The overwhelming message over many years has been that you cannot chop out chunks of a river or certain lakes and ponds as important and ignore the connections to all the other waters. They really function as a network, and they need to be recognized as that whole network of waters being important. Water is always flowing, it's all connected. We need that, and we need the land around the water to continue to provide the functions of supporting shade for rivers and streams, creating structure, wood going into these rivers and streams, slowing water flow down, all these different riparian functions that we get. So we've identified broad areas of land adjacent to rivers and streams that have those, that provide those functions, and many others. We also use that high resolution mapping to understand where we have forest and tree cover down at a small scale in those zones alongside rivers and streams and lakes and ponds. And those places can be really important for wildlife movement in an otherwise fragmented landscape. The animals are going to follow those rivers and streams. And this can help us also understand like where do we have the shade and natural wood input to our rivers and streams to support aquatic habitat. Really powerful data set to have that at such a fine scale resolution where there's trees. So those are the landscape scale components, and that's a lot of Vermont in some ways. It also leaves out a lot of places that I think we know and value for wildlife, for their many natural benefits, and as places we love. So it really is a prioritization, even though it reflects a large chunk of Vermont's landscape. We step, well, actually, and if we should say, if we just conserved those landscape scale places, I think we'd have pretty high confidence in protecting many of the species that were part of that 20 to 40,000. But we can step down in scale and gain some extra confidence that we're getting all these species. And at this smaller scale, there's a whole bunch of things that we bake into the design here. Natural communities, young and old forests, specific aquatic habitats, vernal pools, wetlands, wildlife road crossings, grasslands and shrublands, caves and mines, underground habitats, and then rare species. Now, I'm not going to go through all of these in details, but pick out a few to just highlight here. But know that these are all baked into this. Natural communities are what I work on in a large part of my day-to-day work, going out and finding examples of Vermont's 97 different natural community types. Here's examples of 4 different natural community types that we have in the state, 4 of our 97 different types. What's important to think about is that each one of these has its own suite of species, and what you find on a river cobble shore along the West River in Jamaica is going to be really different than what you find in the alpine meadow on top of Camel's Hump, and so forth for every one of these different natural community types. And many of those species we know, many of them we probably don't. But if we're conserving examples of each of these different types of natural communities, we can have confidence that maybe collectively that gets many of the state's native species, plants and animals. I think also as we look forward to climate change, the top of Camel's Hump, maybe it won't always be alpine meadow, but I'm pretty confident it's always going to support different species than the side of the river in Jamaica. So it builds in some of that climate resilience when we're thinking about what we're going to have for biological diversity into the future. The wildlife road crossings, actually, again, I'd like to hand this off to you since this is key to your work.
Sure. As we think about wildlife road crossings, we want to talk about both over the road crossings and under the road crossings. And so, this is Looney's photo of a moose at Shutesville Hill. So this is Route 100. there's something like 12,000 cars pass on that road surface every day, and yet we still have moves coming up and over the road surface. So that's dangerous, but we still have connectivity there. This is a wildlife shelf that the department helped. It's actually our land. That's the Wild Branch of the Lamoille, and that's Route 15. That bridge up there is Route 15, and so this is a wildlife underpass that we created under Route 15 to allow for connectivity. And then on our floodplain parcel just north of there, we put in something like 2,000 stems. We're restoring that floodplain, and municipally owned bridge was removed just upstream from there, allowing for removing the risk of ice jams and also allowing for better connectivity. So the wildlife road, but Bob explained in great detail the connectivity blocks, that continuous chain of forest. Perfect. In between those forest blocks are roads. And so you want to think about connectivity at two different scales, where there's contiguous forest, and also where are there road crossings, and what are the on-road or under-road conditions that might allow for animal movement. And so we've been working very closely with the Agency of Transportation on wildlife road crossings for quite a while. The new high resolution data has allowed us to better map the over-the-road crossings. We're working with the Agency of Transportation on a wildlife transportation action plan that will prioritize the structures, the gray infrastructure, the bridges and culverts that are allowing for wildlife movement under the highway. And we have put that, we have a prioritization of those bridges and culverts that we worked on for many years called the terrestrial passage screening tool, not a jargon. But that prioritization of structures, we put that on BioFinder to really show how the gray infrastructure allows for wildlife movement. And this takes us to a variety of different overlapping issues. So when we're talking about culverts, we're talking about flooding, and we want to appropriately size our culverts to allow for flooding. That's the essence of climate resilience. But when we're appropriately sizing our culverts, we're also allowing for aquatic organism passage. So all of our fish species and other aquatic species can move unhindered up and down the stream. We're also then, when we have normal flow levels, well, there's dry ground inside that structure that allows for terrestrial wildlife movement. And so this is a place where, by focusing on bridges and culverts, by focusing on that gray infrastructure, we bring in this nexus of benefits for Vermonters. We're not just helping with flood resiliency. We're not just helping with fish passage. It's not just about terrestrial wildlife movement. Vermonters get that whole package. So our focus on wildlife road crossings and under the road crossings is really an important aspect of our connectivity work.
The last part of this scale of features that I wanted to talk about was that there are some elements of the design that are not easily mappable, but that are important to have as part of our mix of forest blocks and the rest of the landscape. And that's young and old forests and the shrublands and grasslands. I say they're not easily mappable, partly because we don't know where they all are. And even when we do, many of these things can move around over time. So we don't expect them to be static. We can't just throw some green on the map and say it's done. But these are all important components of a functional landscape. And what we've done in the design is we've set targets for amounts of young forest, because we know we lack young forest relative to what we've had in the past, even to what we've had prior to the arrival of Europeans on the landscape. We're just below that level of young forest here. We want to bring that up. We also want to increase the amount of old forest, because that structurally complex forest where you get big trees, you get trees falling down, you get gaps in the forest, that actually provides a lot more wildlife habitat value than the sort of forest that we have so much of, where it's all trees that are about 12 inches diameter, they're all straight, and there's not much going on in the forest. So if we can diversify that structure, more young forest, more old forest, it'll enhance the overall quality of the landscape. We also need shrublands and grasslands in particular for the suite of birds that are associated with those places. Those really require a very particular management, and that's been a focus of some of the department's work lately to protect grasslands that support species like bobolink, meadowlark, and some rare birds as well. So the maps here are just showing where those features should be, not the extent of what would be young forest, old forest, or grassland or shrubland. Finally, I don't have a slide on it, but we can think about our knowledge about the locations of rare species, which is work that the department does to keep track of where we know rare plants and rare animals are, can be overlaid on top of all of that and can be one more layer that we can think about. So we stack that all up, we get our design. How are we actually using this in practice? Well, here's some of the ways that we're putting this to work in the department. And we've now, like you've heard, we've had about a decade where we've really been able to get this into many different aspects of our work. We use it to help select where we're going to acquire land, how we might prioritize land. We've acquired some wildlife management areas in part because they have a very particular connectivity benefit. I think of the one, I'm blanking on the name,
Town Farm WMA.
Town Farm WMA, thank you. Which is located in a key connection between the Green Mountain National Forest and Woolwich State Forest. Maybe in the past wouldn't have risen so high on the priority list, but because of that connectivity value, got a little more awareness of that. It informs our management, particularly thinking about the natural community components, the young and old forest components, helps guide management on state lands, both fish and wildlife lands, and our sister department, forest and parks lands. We work with landowners to put landowners' land into a context. Commissioner Shortsleeve used to be doing a bunch of this, helping landowners understand how their land fits into this bigger picture and what they can do to help maintain that. We use this in our review of projects that go through Act 250 and some of the other regulatory processes. It's not the mechanism for regulation, but it can inform when there's another mechanism that brings something into regulation. And we work with towns to build this sort of landscape planning into their town planning. It's also part of the recent updates to Act 250. There was legislation that used Vermont conservation design to help add criteria to Act 250 to protect forest blocks and ecological connectivity when projects are going through Act 250. And it was in recent legislation related to land conservation, setting the goal of conserving 30% of Vermont by 2030. That legislation used Vermont conservation design as the guiding science behind that effort. It's foundational to our wildlife action plan, which we're working on updating right now. This framework of multiple scales, thinking about landscapes, natural communities and habitats, and then individual species, is baked right into that action plan. We do a lot of coordination among conservation partners, and I'll hand this slide off to you.
That's a group from VTrans, the Highways and Habitats Training. And if you ask those gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, they might not think of themselves as conservation partners, and yet they absolutely are. And some of the connectivity work that I described. And so the conservation design allows them to understand, well, how is the work they're doing contributing to this whole? Or the Wild Turkey Federation, they're going to take a particular slice of the design and say, we're focused on this. And now I can see through this larger design, how my piece fits into this larger whole. So the design allows all the conservation partners to get on the same page. Not everyone is working on everything, but it allows them to see how their piece contributes to that larger whole.
Take this one as well.
Oh, sure. We did post on BioFinder the Department of Health's Social Vulnerability Index. And so this is particularly interesting for work that I do with land use planning at the municipal level. I think I recognize some of you from presentations I've given around in Vermont's 268 municipalities. Understanding the people is every bit as important as understanding the landscape. And so understanding more about the people that are present and their needs is incredibly important to understanding what the conservation future might be. So the Social Vulnerability Index allows us to better understand the people and how that interacts with the landscape. And so that's been a new development in BioFinder, is being able to overlay those. So you can say, well, hey, how many mobile home parks are there in my town? Why are they disproportionately affected by flooding compared to other residents? And then begin to understand how they fit in ecologically and in community.
And then just to wrap it up with some final thoughts, I think reiterating a lot of what we said at the beginning, but this is our scientific vision for the state. It's not a mandate. It's something that can be used. It can help inform work that's done. Sort of joke, it's not a buffet. You can't pick and choose the pieces that you like and leave other pieces behind. It really needs all of these pieces that we've outlined working together. So, I'll pick some that are sometimes hot topics, like young and old forest. There's a lot of advocacy for old forest. That's great. We need some of that. We also need young forest, and you can't just pick one and leave the other behind. It's really about all the tools. It's about land conservation. It's about outreach and education. It's about voluntary stewardship. There's so many different ways we can achieve this vision. And Vermont's 80% private land. Even if we get to 30%, we're still going to have 70% private land. It's going to require people choosing to make this investment in sustaining plants and animals into the future. But I think we can do it. And I think what this shows is that we have the landscape that can support what we want, what we value, and that we can keep it into the future if we maintain this intact, connected, and diverse landscape. We can have healthy nature into the future. And I'm really excited about that, trying to keep that moving forward. So with that, there's other questions. I think we're happy to answer them.
That the pie chart that showed all the species like vertebrates and vascular plant, there was above it. It said like 24,000 to 43,000 species. Why? What's the discrepancy? Is there that many unidentified species really in Vermont?
Yeah, we don't know to 20,000. We don't know how many are out there. I mean, the vast majority of those are very, very small.
Like probably fungi or something, or.
And I think mostly the invertebrates. And I think the way that was created was experts. I think the original taxonomic teams maybe that were working towards the first wildlife action plan. I think they reviewed the literature. They thought about what's known, how fast are species being discovered, what's the likely range of species. And so every category actually has a range. And the invertebrates had a huge range of tens of thousands of species, potentially.
Well, things like vertebrates and vascular trees, there can't be any unidentified of those, would there be?
I think we're pretty solid on the vertebrate animals. Plants, plants kind of come and go to some extent, but we're talking about a handful of species, not many.
20,000.
So it's really the fungi and the invertebrates, those things that we just don't know much about, and probably, frankly, never will, because it's just too much to grasp.
The forest blocks, I'm a little confused about. Forest blocks, a block is defined by a contiguous section that's surrounded by roads or farms or.
Yes. Yeah. So you're from the islands, right?
Yeah.
Forest blocks are really easy to spot in the islands because they pop. But it's not just the forest; it's also the associated wetlands. So when you hopefully zoom in on BioFinder tonight, go to the islands, And some of those the lines of the forest you'll absolutely recognize. Then you'll say, hey, that's weird. That's a different line. And that's because of the presence of other natural cover, wetlands, streams, rivers, and so forth. And so, all of Lake Champlain is going to show up as part of a habitat block because it is, in fact, a habitat for a variety of species.
What's on the horizon for animal crossings overhead and underhead and under roads for Vermont?
We're there's a lot going on, actually. I'll start with just the basics. Every time VTrans replaces a structure, we're doing good things for wildlife. So when we build new, we're overwhelmingly getting aquatic organism passage, and because of the hydrologic formulas that they're using, we're overwhelmingly getting terrestrial wildlife movement. So if we had a world of unlimited dollars and VTrans was able to replace all of the structures that need replacing, we would be moving leaps and bounds ahead with wildlife road crossings. There are a few places that we need to really invest in. I-89 is our biggest barrier. And so we have I-89, the Winooski River, Route 2, River Road, Cochrane Road, depending on where you are, and the railroad. And so there in Bolton and Waterbury, we've been working with the Agency of Transportation on a massive wildlife underpass. We call it the Sharkyville Wildlife Crossing. So the state of Vermont has already received $2.1 million in federal dollars earmarked just for wildlife crossings. That's not taking away from other infrastructure. But we've already received $2.1 million to design this structure. It's replacing a 5-foot wide, 390-foot long metal culvert with a 150-foot wide, 200-foot long tunnel that would allow for the full suite of wildlife, aquatic organisms, reduce erosion, improve climate resilience. We're hoping to secure federal construction funding for that. And that's very much a work in progress. We have one more opportunity to apply for the Wildlife Crossing Pilot Program. But those are very expensive structures. And then lastly, there are some species like particularly salamanders and turtles that are not well served by our current system of bridges and culverts, and they really need special attention. By comparison, there are something like 1 million deer hit on American roads every year, literally 1 million. And forgive the pun, we're not putting a dent in the population. With turtles, we can kill just a few turtles and really wipe out a population very, very quickly. So there are certain species that need a little bit more help. The Moncton salamander crossing is a great example. That was done on a town-owned road. Thousands of salamanders were being killed every year. The tunnels allow for that animal movement. And just this spring, we saw a bear go through that tunnel. Now, the hair on its shoulders was touching the roof of the culvert. It could have easily gone over, but structures like that are working for a whole host of species. So it's really underpasses. That's the focus of the future. Mm-hmm. That's where we meet those multiple goals of flood resilience, aquatic organism passage, and terrestrial wildlife movement. We don't need, in my opinion, my professional opinion, we don't need overpasses in Vermont. We need lots and lots of underpasses.
Okay.
Are you working with the small towns too, instead of just state highways?
Yes. Well, the Moncton crossing is a town-owned road, and that was because of the work of the Moncton Conservation Commission that structure was built. Huntington has just asked me to help. They want to build one under Heinsberg Hollow Road, and so they're now beginning to accumulate the data. So yes, those structures are very expensive, and so doing them on town-owned roads is very difficult. And towns are strapped for cash. And so even appropriately sizing their existing infrastructure is a big ask. So for now, we're really saying, focus on your existing infrastructure, get that bigger. It's going to help fish and wildlife. And when we can access some outside monies, those specialty crossings would be really great too. Other questions?
Where's your money for land acquisition coming from? Is there a lot of federal money that has been coming in, or is it coming from the state, or?
Yeah, this would be a good question for John.
Yeah, well, that's a great question, Beth. We have a wide range of funding sources that we use for land conservation projects. So we've used Pittman Robertson funds with non-federal match to buy land. We've used recovery land acquisition grants. We've used funding from the EPA. We've used funding from the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board, which is general funds, Land and Water Conservation Fund. And there's a whole range of federal and non-federal funding sources that are available for land acquisition. And some of them are specific to the purpose of the acquisition, like recovery land acquisition grant monies. They're focused on conservation of land that would support a federally listed endangered or threatened species. There aren't many of those in Vermont, but there are some, and we've used them successfully to, for instance, expand our ownership footprint at Snake Mountain over in Addison County because of the federally listed Indiana bat. We've used those same funds down in southeastern Vermont for we actually created a WMA down there, Turner Hill WMA, because it has one of the few populations of the northeastern bulrush on the property. It's a bulrush that's federally listed as endangered, I believe, and it occurs on certain types of beaver impounded wetland systems. This property is loaded with that, so we were successful in securing the funds and ended up with a really big, amazing wildlife management area. If you haven't been there, and for some of you, it would be out of your way, but it's a pretty special place. I would encourage you to go there, both just for the experience, but it's also a great place to go hunting.
What's it called again?
Turner Hill Wildlife Management.
How many acres is that? You know, offhand?
I remember it's on the order of 2,500.
Oh, it's a pretty big.
The 30 by 30, and I've also heard the 50 by 50. Right, does that translate into state-owned land, the 50% and the 30%, or is that still privately owned land? They just turn over the conservation rights or the development rights and whatnot?
The way it's defined in the legislation, it's any land that is permanently protected against development. So it could be either of those. It could be state land, federal land, and private land that's under easement. The 50 by 50 is even a little broader, where it's land that might not be permanently protected, but has some assurance that maybe it's likely to remain in a natural state. And so I think there's some discussion now about, like, does UVA land count as part of the 50 by 50? And I don't think that's resolved, but that's sort of the range of conservation that's being looked at for that.
What's UVA?
Current use value appraisal program.
Yeah.
So check my numbers, but I think we're currently, according to the inventory, we're currently at 27% permanently conserved. Of that, not of that, but I believe 16 to 17% of the Vermont landscape is either state or federally owned. So the difference is what's privately protected.
Just wanted to add one thing. I would be remiss if I didn't mention to your earlier question about funding sources for a land acquisition. So the Vermont Duck Stamp Program was established in 1986. It is, without argument, I would say, one of the most successful land conservation funding programs that the state has ever enjoyed. It's large. Well, you know, if you want to hunt waterfowl, you got to buy a duck stamp and a federal stamp. All of the money that is accrued from the sale of Vermont duck stamps goes into a fund that is dedicated to wetland conservation and restoration. It cannot be used for anything else. That is the beauty of the legislation that created the authority for that stamp. It's been wildly successful. All of the principal that's accrued from that program goes into the account. None of the principal gets touched. We only spend the interest. And so it varies from year to year. But as a result, this department is the largest owner of wetlands in the state of Vermont. And all of those wetlands are available for the enjoyment of public, whether you hunt, fish, trap, bird watch, whatever it is. they're available to you. I can't remember, David, how many acres we have now, but it's at least 13,000 have been conserved with that stamp program. That doesn't include all the other wetlands that we conserve with other funding sources. But given your responsibilities, I wanted to just point that one.
Would you also like to mention the habitat stamp?
You should speak to that, Commissioner.
So similar to the duck stamp, there's also a donation-based program called the Habitat Stamp, and I'm sure most of you have seen that as you buy your hunting and fishing licenses. And that's a program that's been wildly successful. It's been about 10 years now that we've had that program. And Beth is displaying the last year's Habitat Stamp on her water bottle. I'm still waiting for my 2025 one. But I brought, one reason I did want to bring that up is because by far and large, the vast quantity of people buying habitat stamps are hunters and anglers. And so just, that's very pertinent, I think, to this board to celebrate that. So, and it provides a lot of habitat work between land acquisition, being able to do different management techniques on public land and also private land. And so just, yeah, it's another great funding source for our work.
Are there any other questions or comments?
How much boots on the ground time do you guys get in those blocks?
Never enough.
Yeah.
My version of field work is a town meeting. I spent a lot of time in town halls across Vermont. No one loves a night meeting more than I do.
And under bridges, you're under bridges a lot.
Oh, right, a troll.
Yeah.
We do go out and continue to find different natural communities, different habitats, do assessments of these places. We do on the ground work when we're looking at them in some of the regulatory processes. It's not quite fun, but at least we're outside. And so we do continue to do field work, and we refine this. That gets back in, that department of work goes back in and just cycling to keep this ever moving.
And next month, we'll be flying all of our connectivity areas with a donation from Lighthawk International. They'll be helping us fly. So we'll do 6 flights over the course of June to be able to photograph and document our connectivity.
I was going to say, I think it's important for people to remember, it's very easy to focus in on those colors on the maps, but a lot of you, if you zoom in on your properties, they may not be in there, but all those pieces are important to the puzzle, and it's important to preserve and to manage those in a proper manner too. So it's all connected, and it feeds into that system that you're looking at as priorities.
That 6 flights is for the whole state?
Yes.
Yeah.
So are you able to use information from like iNaturalist or eBird, or is that like something outside of what you?
We don't typically use iNaturalist data in terms of feeding into the conservation design. It oftentimes speaks to where there are people that are really excited about reporting, and so there isn't necessarily a good distribution statewide. The same is actually true with roadkill. Yes, there are people who are very excited about documenting roadkill on our Roads and Wildlife app, and the problem with that kind of community science data is it's give the pun hit or miss. And so it speaks more to where there are people excited. And so we're really looking for statewide data sets. That said, the Heritage Program does, when a townwide inventory is done by a consultant, that information does feed into the Heritage Program. And so we do gain the insight of those inventories. But for the conservation design, it's really well documented field data.
Well, I'll add to that though, that we're partnering with a nonprofit, the Vermont Center for Eco Studies, which is based out of Norwich, I think. They have been collecting data from iNaturalist, from citizen observations through other pathways. And they've created this thing they call the Vermont Atlas of Life, which is all these observations. They've taken them, they've done a bunch of modeling based on them to correct for that observer bias and come up with ranges of all these species, common and uncommon. And they're working now to take that data where they've observed and predicted species and overlay with the conservation design So we can see how those two things mesh and whether one might point to misses in either of those efforts. And so we're just continually trying to find sources of data and do the best we can with that.
So this is your application, your department's application? Do departments like Forest and Parks and DEC and those guys use it as well, or they have their own kind of version of this, or?
This is ours, but it's ours that we've created, but it's the agency's platform. There's nothing else that's competing with it in terms of providing that overall ecological picture.
So staff from both of those departments have advised on this quite a bit over the years. Every time we do an update, we have a steering committee, and Forest Parks and Rec and Department of Environmental Conservation are always part of that team. And so they're real partners. So, I mean, our department is the one that has brought this to fruition and has made it our job to get this down. But it is very much an agency project. Thank you all so much for your time this evening. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that was great. Next on the agenda, we have the commissioners' updates.
You know,
Sure.
I don't think I have any updates to give other than the legislative session is hopefully rapid closing up. And outside of that, forward to seeing you all in June.
Yeah, in June. So in June, we have a big meeting in June. We're going over the deer rules. As far as I know, that's still the agenda. So I think, our expectation is that we will probably, I think there's a lot of different pieces of that rule that are part of the proposal. So I think we should plan on, probably voting on the majority of them individually as opposed to one block like we have historically in the past. That allows us to focus on any one particular area and have that discussion and take it from there as opposed to as a block. So I would take the opportunity to read the proposal again and all the comments and just be ready for a nice long conversation.
The date?
The date, I don't have off the top of my head.
I believe it's the 21st.
It is the 21st.
It's 21st, yeah.
18.
Yeah, 18th, okay.
Is that going to be the whole meeting? Is there, do you know what other agenda might be there?
I don't know at this point.
The fish vote comes up the third.
Okay, yeah, the third fish roll or vote.
Right, because Elkhart should be acting on that hopefully this month.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, it'll be a long one.
No updates on that appeal? Oh. No updates on that appeal, the fur bearer rules?
I've not heard anything yet. So I will pass that on once we hear more.
Any questions for the commissioner?
Yeah, for the new ones that you're on board, what was the appeal on the fur bearer rule? What was it all about?
Wasn't really around during it, so I will put it over to Catherine, who is the superstar behind all of that.
So it has a history with respect to maybe in 2022, the legislature directed the department to open up the fur bearer rule and incorporate best management practices that were promulgated by AFWA, which is the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies, into the rule, as well as to address landowner conflicts related to hunting coyotes with dogs. And there were two separate acts that were passed with sort of criteria and directives for the board to consider in promulgating that rule. The board went through a pretty, robust sort of stakeholder process, and then we initiated rulemaking. We incorporated best management practices into the trapping portion of the rule, and we came up with some standards around, numbers of dogs, collars, requirements that people be able to locate and recall their hounds at any time during the hunt. The legislature posed part of those rules. Specifically, they objected to, and they can object under the statute for rulemaking, which is under the Vermont Administrative Procedures Act. And they had 4 major objections. One was related to the definition of trapping as a form of hunting. One was related to the setbacks related to trapping. There was a provision that we had to fashion setbacks, and we exempted traps that were in the water and under ice. And one was related to the control of dogs. Not, the legislature said that that wasn't sufficient. And then I think the final one was,
Roads?
Excuse me?
Was it roads?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, it was the definition of trails.
Definition of trails.
It was the definition of trails. So we went, it was probably the first time that the department or any agency, that the Agency of Natural Resources has ever promulgated a rule over the objection of the legislature. And it was appealed. It was challenged in court, in Superior Court. We won that case. We won on every single objection. And now it's being appealed to the Vermont Supreme Court. It's a sort of an interesting process because this particular appeal route calls for something called on the record review, which means that instead of having testimony that relates to the issues on appeal, the court looks at the record making record. So basically it looked at all of the public comments. It looked at all the materials that the department used to justify its decision-making process. It looked at the hearings that we had, the LCAR, before both legislature and before the public. And so it was just a lot of paper that we gave to the court. And then we kind of made our arguments about, whether we thought we were following legislative intent or not, whether the rules were arbitrary or capricious, whether we, did our jobs, basically. So now it's been appealed to the Vermont Supreme Court. Right now, as of today, I don't think the court has set a schedule yet. That's probably the next part of the process, is for the court to set a schedule and, ask the parties to file briefs. There may be oral argument. It's a process that takes, it could take 1 to 2 years. It just depends on, how the court sort of deals with it. But that's just kind of it, a broad overview.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Catherine. Catherine guided us through that process very well.
Just curious about it.
Okay, any other thoughts, any comments? If not, I get a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion, we adjourn.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, meeting adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
All right, how are you?
Better.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Have your board.
Yeah.